welcome to the February 12th meeting of GLIMPRINT and associated organizations. Today we have a presentation by Maria Abou Chakra and Liesbet Geris on the theme of AI is a good support, but we need white box models to truly push prediction, which I think is something that many people in this community feel strongly about. And so I appreciate them being willing to tell us about their thoughts on that and lead a discussion. As always, I need to remind people that these meetings are live streamed and recorded and made available in edited form afterwards as a resource. Tom Helikar is still traveling today. Jim Sluka, Lorenzo, and I are available along with Ellen, who's been helping out a lot with the GLIMPRINT organization. And you can reach us at the indicated email addresses if you need assistance, ideas, suggestions, comments. We're always here to take your suggestions. We have a variety of communication channels. They work better if you use them. In particular, we have our YouTube channel of archive of talks. Amelia's talk from last week is now up online. It's a great resource. If you didn't hear the talk in person last week, I encourage you to go listen to it. We have the IMAG webpage, which can post material, especially publications related to multi-scale modeling. If you'd like to put them up there, Jim Sluka can help with that. Let him know. We are redoing the GLIMPRINT webpage. I'm not sure exactly where we are with that process, but it will allow you to post announcements for workshops, meetings, job opportunities, funding, and so on. Again, reach out to Jim and Tom Helikar on that. We would love to make that a better website that's more usable for the community. Coming up, we have a quite busy schedule. We have Philip Gerli talking about respiratory disease forecasting. We also have a talk on economics perspective on epidemics. We have John Hickey from the new MISM Center at Duke talking about using spatial omics to simulate cell behavior. And then we have in March, Reid Shabman from NIH, from NIAID, talking to us about opportunities and priorities at NIH. So help us keep the schedule of seminars full. Please suggest yourself, your students, your postdocs, the people you'd like to hear from. If you've spoken before and would like to speak again, that's fine. Let us know. We'll do our best to accommodate you. Reach out to me, James Glazier, Jim Sluka, Tom Helikar, and we'll do our best to get you on the books. Maria is also involved in scheduling, would be happy to help you with that as well. So we have a couple of things to remind people about. There is the EDITH roadmap for European Virtual Human Twin. You've got in the room person in charge, namely Liesbet, so you can ask her about that going forward if you have questions, comments. We have going on the OpenVT reproducible agent-based multicellular modeling competition. We really would love to have more submissions. If you, your students, your friends, or postdocs have published multicellular models in the past 2 years in any referee journal, please submit them for consideration. We've made the application process quite simple. It takes less than half an hour to apply. We would love to have more submissions, and people who win will be given a seminar slot here in the working group. There also are cash prizes for it and opportunity to present at SNB if you're happening to be there in Graz this summer. So please do help us get the word out on that. Are there any other short announcements before we get started with the main event? Then I would like to jump to our presentation and discussion for today from Liesbet Geris and Abou Chakra on the relationship between AI and mechanistic models.
So, well, it's nice to be back here. I'm sorry I cannot attend more of these meetings because they are very interesting. So what I would like to do is, since most people know VPH, just very briefly, for those who don't know the society, VPH is the International Society for In-Silico Medicine, which means that we represent the non-profit part of the community. So we represent the non-profit part of the community. We have individual members, but also over 100 institutional members of the society. And what we aim to do is really try to tackle the challenges, the common challenges that sit between the bit and the bedside, so that when models are ready to make that translation to the clinic, that also the systems are in place to do that. We have a collaboration with industry in another nonprofit organization called the Avicenna Alliance, where industry and academia are represented in a 50-50 manner, and that is with pharma, medtech, and software. In the recent years with the society, we have been focusing on building the ecosystem beyond just academia. And also making sure that we understand for each of the stakeholders involved in the whole process of translation, what are their expectations, what are their fears, what do they need to see in order to build trust in in-silico models. So that means that we've been working a lot with people from patient organizations, with individual patient advocates, with clinical organizations, and with healthcare professionals in hospitals and other settings. We've also been engaging quite a lot with regulators and with certification bodies, like the notified bodies in Europe. FDA, of course, historically has been very important in that discussion. But more and more on the European side, things are finally moving ahead as well. And then we've been now getting more and more involved with the buyers and the payers. So one of the board members of the society is an agency that does procurement of innovation, but we're having more conversations now with insurance companies and organizations of insurance companies. And then historically, we have had good contacts with people sitting in different directorate generals in the European Commission, focusing on research on ICT and health, and now recently also more and more on health itself. So this is, in a nutshell, who we are. And what we do is, as a society, we are a member-based society. Of course, we engage with our members. We organize conferences, summer schools, student awards, you name it. But since 5 years or so, we have also been partnering in European multi-partner projects, where we are responsible for stakeholder engagement outreach, for high-level policy and regulatory landscaping and contacts and capacity building, for communication dissemination, for ecosystem building and road mapping, also working on standards and strategic alignment in that, and then partnerships with different organizations. So this is what the society does. I'm also a university professor in Liège and in Leuven in Belgium, working on the development of in-silico and in vitro tools for skeletal tissue engineering applications. When we talk about AI and data, I've been sitting in a lot of meetings from the policy side, from the side of hospital management, of clinical societies. And then when people start talking about doing predictive modeling, I always get the feeling that they're trying to make a brownie. If the brownie is the product that they want to make, the clinical decision support system or something like that, then there's, of course, you have the ingredient, you have the process of making it. But when people talk about making a brownie, I have the feeling that this is what they think about. So they feel that the conversation is always, how do we get more data? And then somehow something will happen to the data, and magically, ta-da, the brownie is appearing. So they have no real clue about what it takes to go from the raw ingredients to the actual brownie. So what recipe should be there, and how actually the recipe should be looked at from the very beginning, because you might need to change, you might be building the most powerful oven in the world, but that's maybe not what you need for that particular recipe. So this is usually how I tend to get started. Digital twins is one of these new buzzwords that are entering the stage. I just wanted to frame, if you hear me say digital twins, then this is how we have started using the term, using so the direct use of individual specific models for prevention, prediction, screening, diagnosis, and treatment of a disease, and the evaluation, optimization, de-risking, selection, and personalization of intervention options, so drugs, devices, ATMPs, or advanced therapies. I'm fully aware that this is more the definition of personalized modeling and simulation rather than the strict definition of digital twins. But even in this NASEM report that you all know, the strict real-time dynamic interaction between the physical and the virtual were slightly loosened, let's say, to especially in the healthcare context, to human-in-the-loop decision-making. Then I usually, when I talk to people, explain what digital twins can do or what models can focus on. So the different levels, the different applications, the manufacturing, the medical facility. I don't need to explain that to you. But what I then do when I talk about in-silico technologies or digital twins is that I explain that in-silico technologies are not just one thing, but multiple things. And that you have the black box data-driven AI machine learning applications that are very good in health and care, in specific applications where we have enough high quality data. That we have the other end of the spectrum where we start with the mechanisms that we then translate, but that in many, many cases, we don't know all of the mechanisms on all of the levels. So we make certain levels of abstraction, and that we don't have, in many cases in biology and medicine, enough data to do things purely data-driven, so that we sit somewhere in the middle. Now, people have very different interpretations. I've been, when speaking to policymakers, computer modeling and simulation is something they just blank. So what we have to do in order to get engagement with them is talk about AI and health, and everything becomes AI. And if we then do put a slide like this in to make them understand that there is more than just AI, but when they see the black box, they're like, yeah, but the black box AI, that's not what we want. We want the white box AI. And so then we always have to explain that actually AI is, the white box part for the most of it. So words can have very different meanings for people, and that is also something to be mindful of when we start pushing back on should something be AI, or is it wise to call everything AI or not, or insist on specific wording. It really depends on who you are talking to. Of course, the risk if we go with just everything is AI, we've seen that 10 years ago when the Commission first started calling everything AI, that at some point their funding calls also mentioned whenever they wanted to talk about modeling and simulation, they called it AI, also in the funding calls. And the community knew that they meant also more mechanistic models. So people submitted projects to that call, and then the reviewers that were chosen actually went with the very narrow interpretation of AI. So a whole bunch of projects were kicked out. And then we had to officially, write a white paper, go to the Commission, explain them that these are actually not the same things and that they need to be mindful. So now in these calls, you'll see AI and computer modeling and simulation, which still is a bit strange, but okay. Now, when we are on the spectrum, as you also already know and use, you can take technologies, black box technologies, AI technologies, and apply them to white box models or more mechanistic models, to hypermodels, surrogates, to do parametrization and silico trials. And from the other side, same thing. You can use mechanisms to constrain the models or the AI, the data-driven models, or do checks like in knowledge bases or clinical guidelines or things like that. when you go to larger simulation platforms, there are additional roles, but then we go a little bit beyond what you do with computer modeling and simulation, and we're talking about resource orchestration and optimization, so that when you are building in a simulation platform where different building blocks are available, that AI can help you find the right blocks that can communicate with one another. There is the promise that they should help harmonize, that AI should help harmonize data formats and standardization efforts. I'm really looking forward to seeing that done. That would solve a lot of issues, integrate diverse data and models, identify missing data, create, retrieve the knowledge and create, for instance, knowledge graphs, optimize workflows, optimize executions in HPC. So these could be for all of these, there is also a role for AI. But today we're more talking really about AI as a tool to make an application. James already mentioned that in Europe we've been working on, or that the European Commission has launched the European Virtual Human Twins Initiative, which aims to provide this infrastructure simulation platform that will be publicly available also outside of the EU, of course. And that aims to accelerate the development, the credibility assessment, and also the uptake and adoption of digital twins or virtual human twins in health and care. This has led to the roadmap, and indeed, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have. If you haven't seen it, it became quite a comprehensive document where we actually start from the context, the need analysis for the different stakeholders, the challenges, and then went into the vision, the technology that is required, the infrastructure, the ethical, legal, social, regulatory standards, HTA, to the uptake, the incentives, the industry, and then finally we made recommendations to different stakeholders, including the European Commission. There's also an extended version of this document that explains the why, what, who, but not the how, and just this is much more high level in content. There's also a short statement that would translate into 2 pages of A4 that it captures the main points. That's called the manifesto that you can find on the website of the European Commission. Well, one very important thing there, and then I'm coming to the last point that I want to make on trust, is we worked a lot on building the ecosystem, on building the community, where if you start from the bottom right here, grabbing my laser pointer here, with the patient and the civil society organizations and the healthcare providers, these would be the users or the intended beneficiaries of the virtual human twins or the models. Then you have the developers, industry, academia, innovation centers. You have the communities, which are the catalysts that bring people together and allow these broader conversations. You have the enablers, both from the infrastructure and the financial side. And then we have the managers or the context providers. So in which legal framework are you operating? What are the governing actors? What are the social ethics boundaries that you're working in? And in that context, we've done quite a lot of work with patients and healthcare providers in focus groups and surveys and all kinds of different compositions to understand how they look at this and to prepare for future co-creation of new solutions. And so all of these ways of doing that engagement we've gathered in the info kit that you can find all the templates for focus groups and all the strategies and who to talk to, what are the resources that you can use. It's all there. We developed educational material to do this. And as a result of the engagement with the patients, we also made a high-level video series that's called Code and Cure that goes into very short videos explaining key steps of the modeling process. Lots of engagement was also done using additional augmented reality. This was teaching to healthcare providers, and this was patient preparation for surgery. Now, in all of these things, trust was the word that actually came up the most. And trust means very different things for very different people. Some patients, they want to trust the technology, so they want to know the technologies. Other patients want to trust the physician. And then if the physician trusts the technology, that's enough for the patient. Physicians want to trust the technology, but for them, frequently healthcare providers feel, well, there is the trustworthiness that can be shown, but I'll trust it when it works in my hands. So there's really this difference between trust and trustworthiness that comes up quite a lot in these conversations. As developers of these technologies, we can prove trustworthiness by doing credibility assessment, but trust is something else. Trust has many more aspects to it. If we want to start with the bottom right here, trust without understanding is blind faith. So in order to be able to have trust, you need transparency, you need interpretability, you need reliability. So does it work every time? The accuracy, how accurate is it? The uncertainty, what happens if something is a little bit off? How does it change? Robustness, how robust indeed is it with respect to that change? Predictability, accountability, who is responsible when something goes wrong? Fairness, and then also usefulness or actionability. So what does it mean for me? So these are all aspects that are part of building trust. On the trustworthiness side, there is the technical credibility. So you have lots of these things coming up from different regulatory agencies. I've picked here a few from the US, focusing on the AI side, because we're all very familiar with the VMV40, with all of the guidances on the medical devices and the physics-based model side. So here are some recent things from the AI side. There's also more and more frameworks and checklists that are being put in place to get this trustworthy or credible AI. And on the international level, recently an ISO IEC working group was approved that will work on an international standard on in-silico technologies in the context of medical devices, starting with first, not a standard, but a technical, I forgot the word, a technical note on the terminology, and then two standards, one focusing on the mechanistic models and one then on AI-based models. So last two slides, where are we currently in terms of explainability for AI when we're talking about predictive models? More and more, we go away from just the explainability in the one size fits all. So it's not because it looks reasonable that that actually means that your AI is explainable, because this is also a quality that can be gained then afterwards. So how can we make this further specific? By asking for audience and task specific applications. There is the aspect of traceability, so the versioning, the model cards, labeling the intended use. Also, more and more, we go towards or the inclusion of uncertainty. And so the explainable AI plus uncertainty, that quantification. And uncertainty quantification, maybe a note that is of relevance in this discussion. When talking to clinicians that sit in the medical device coordination group, so those that provide the guidances for medical device regulations in Europe, they see this word uncertainty very differently. They hear the word uncertainty and they interpret it, you're not sure about the results. Whereas from a technical perspective, we think this is a good thing, uncertainty quantification, because you can tell precisely where you're certain and where the uncertainty begins. But this is, in those conversations that you have with some of the clinicians and policymakers, they don't understand this in the same way. The clinically validated interpretability, so not just looking plausible, but actually improving decisions and outcomes, monitoring for drift and doing post-market surveillance and lifecycle governance, and then hybrid transparency for large language models, so that there is always the retrieval provenance, the citations, the guardrails, to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate. Some of the things that are not addressed yet is that there is really no good universal metric for what is explainable, good explanation across different tasks. That explanations can increase trust or frequently increase trust, even when the explanation is wrong. And so if it's being gamed, it can create the illusion of understanding. And then there is the causal interpretability that remains very hard when you have clinical data. So to actually get the mechanistic and the causal claims from that, it still remains very hard. So these were some of the points, also based on some of the topics that Ryan and I discussed ahead of this meeting, that I wanted to provide.
Where I would like to start is with labeling everything, let's say AI. What if we switch to what I keep referring to as interpretable and non-interpretable models? Many are actually starting to switch to these sort of terminology. Do you think it is a better, or should we look at different? I don't want it to be AI alone or black box versus white box, but maybe we want to start to hone in on what is the difference between these models. What are they providing us? Should we be focusing on that, or is that gonna just add more confusion?
I think part of the challenge in this is in the technical and the creators of on the side of the creators of these tools. When we started saying, well, you have data-driven and knowledge-based, for instance, then there is also knowledge-based AI, where they do the sanity check by looking at the prediction and looking it up in a knowledge basis or in the clinical guidelines. And that was called knowledge-based modeling, not what we understand knowledge-based modeling being mechanistic modeling. So there is some sort of, I don't know, scientific competition, I don't know, that is also at play. Ideally, we would be able to agree on terms that are interpreted in one way. I'm not sure that we will ever get to the point that the terms that we use as developers and the terms that you can use when you are having conversations with policymakers and other stakeholders are the same. And so trying to align all of that, I'm not sure that is necessary. The downside of that of having that distinction is that you have to speak two languages, right? There's one language that you speak at home, and then there's one language that you speak outside of your home, and so there might be some confusion. So it's a very long answer to say, actually, I don't know. There's pros and cons to renaming things that way.
No, I agree, and I feel always confused. Like, what should I say? And I know right now we're switching to between black box and white box, interpretable, non-interpretable. And I agree that AI sort of blends everything in the beginning, but now it took on a whole new meaning, or it means a whole different types of models. And
Yes.
maybe it won't matter at some point.
Yeah, that's the thing. It matters in certain discussions when you have closed envelope budgets, and people will say this is not good, and it's used as a kind of way to put things down. Rather, the same way, like, this is a digital twin and this is not a digital twin. Yeah, so I'm always more in favor of broader terminology when speaking to other people, but maybe one quick comment, though, that sometimes terms mean very different things, even to I already mentioned that with the knowledge bases, but I think that it's an actual issue that even on the technical side, we don't agree on terms. So we should probably take the habit more and more at the beginning of papers that we write or grants that we write to very clearly state, this is what I consider to be a digital twin, and this is how I am going to use it. And maybe that is the best way. And that's also how we talk to regulators. These are the definitions that we will use, and that might save some of the confusion.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always also, when I'm writing my models, or I'm at least explaining the method, I'm always like, it's a model, but agent-based, rule-based, knowledge-based, mechanistic-based, just trying to make sure that all the different elements exist. And I don't know if at some point we have to have the right terminology, because I do just make them up based on what I think I am doing. I think that's what most of us do. Yeah, I think we've all survived, right? And I think that maybe that gets me to my next question. So mechanistic models have always had a hard time gaining sort of confidence. And I think you talked about confidence, and I don't think it's a trust issue. I mean, I think one of the quotes that always flies around is, some models are useful, but all of them are wrong. And I don't think we disagree with that, but I wonder whether we get stuck, because every time, we have to propose a model, the first thought to reviewers or the first thought to anybody who's questioning it, it's all models are wrong. But it's rare that we get the question, what is this model asking, or what kind of questions can it answer? And I wonder if we start by learning how to frame our models in such a way that says, okay, this is my model, and these are the kind of type of question that I can answer, and this is where it becomes useful, because the use is really the power of these models, but we get stuck in limitations, uncertainties, trustworthiness, and right away it says, well, your model is wrong. It's always a simplified version, but we have to spend so much more time trying to just defend the other part. And I think it's okay, we have to defend, but I just want to figure out, why is it so difficult to provide a mechanistic model? But if you have a data-driven model that just kind of says, you don't even know how you got this data, but you kind of can see the trends, and that is okay. I wonder how we can, help.
I think this is then a conversation with different stakeholders, because then you're talking to indeed people that are generating data, whether it's biomedical scientists or medical doctors that have this faith. This is the data that I generated, so if we build something on the data, it must be correct, and all of the stuff that you're doing in the computer is just messing around. I'd say it's probably, again, well, their AI maybe did us a favor, because people started realizing that there is something that you can do with the data that they might not understand that will do something. And then I found it easier in the lab to explain to my experimental colleagues if I first went to them and I did more, it was statistics back then, of course, multivariate statistics that you do with their data, that you see, this is what you can get from this. And now if we do this and this, then we can, do other things. And this is not going to replace your data, but then you can ask it questions and you can play around. So really, indeed, like you say, do a better job at explaining what it can and cannot do. And then there are two steps. There is, of course, first, letting people understand what it can do, what the capabilities are. And on the backside of it, there is the credibility. So you can have that whole conversation about what you can do and what it shows and what it and then say, now, why do you have to believe what I'm saying and what I'm telling you? Or why should you believe? There is this whole regulatory science. There is the credibility assessment. But there we come again to the uncertainty quantification. Maybe those are not things that immediately have to be said. I also don't ask when I see a biomedical presentation. I also don't ask for the calibration certificate of the devices. I trust that their PCR device is working well. I don't need to see the melting curve. I trust that they're doing this well, that they assess this for their credibility. So there is that aspect but we need to instruct people that this is all there.
No, I agree, but I think because we're so diverse and coming from different fields, we haven't really figured out how the language, I guess, or what is the standard method of building a mechanistic model. I guess maybe we can go back to why are mechanistic models important for twins? I know you said that we have data, but when we lack data, is that a really good step? I mean, of course, I think it's a good step, but why do you think they'd be powerful for these twins that we shouldn't ignore?
Well, usually what we tell my students is that when you have a question, you need to look at what is available. What is the data that you have? What is the knowledge that you have? And what is the question that you need to answer? And based on that, you should pick your technology. And in some cases, when you want to do exploring and there is not enough good quality data to build that model in a data-driven way, then the mechanistic model makes sense. And sometimes a mechanistic model is enough if you want to answer a very specific question. Then there's no need to go the big data route, because you know the mechanism, you can translate it. And then, of course, it also becomes easier from a regulatory perspective. Regulatory science is a bit slower, the same as policy, as Jacob mentioned. It's all lagging behind. So if you can do it in a mechanistic way and it works fine, then yeah, that can get you to the answer quicker. But if you don't have that knowledge and you do have good data and you have the new technologies that are getting increasingly powerful to do it, then there's also no need to push for the mechanistic side per se. So to me, it's not about who is winning or who is more important. I do believe that there are situations where one is the most logical choice over the other one, because I do see and I get that there are different opinions, having discussed with the AI specialists in health in my university, which I'm not part of. They do not, they seem to become more pessimistic actually about the possibility of AI to really realize what people are saying in terms of predictive modeling of health of patients in these rare diseases. So and these are people that have been working in this space their whole life, that are very well aware of what is there and what is coming. They do see the limitations still, because there is the issue of the data. If you don't have the data, then you cannot do a data-driven prediction. That's just the fact. And yeah, so even if they become more powerful, if the basis is not there, then it's not there.
Well, I agree. And I hope everybody who's listening to us, we're not saying AI is not right. Like, it's a powerful tool. I mean, later we can discuss how we can create hybrid models. I mean, everybody's excited to use AI as a tool, as a way to explore, also predict. So but it's just, we want us to incorporate the mechanistic. There's a hand up, Joel.
It's very interesting, this topic, right? I agree with Liz was just saying, which it depends on the problem, right? If we're looking into a population level, data can describe a lot of things, right? But the rare disease, like, it is a problem for an AI trying to predict that. But not only that, mechanistic models can also give you counterfactuals, can test if your way that you're trying to predict this disease, your understanding is correct, right? We can constrain so many things that can explain. Maybe a medication can cure something and we're thinking it's doing through a method. And then when you put that in a model, you see that, wait, that doesn't agree with the logic. So even though you have the result that is positive, the patient is being cured, but maybe it's a secondary effect that you don't even know, right? So it is very important for us too, in this terms of hybrid, right? Putting a mechanistic with an AI. It's because in terms of transforming AI in a white box, the model give you that power, right? Whenever you tie those two things together, you can understand how the AI is making the decision to classify something as they do, because you can look into the mechanistic model and make changes in the mechanistic model that affect that classification, right? So you have a better understanding of how the classification is happening on that black space by poking the mechanistic space.
Other examples of combining them are going maybe in the other direction. When you have patient data, you can first do a clustering and then use your mechanistic model to explain what is the difference between the different clusters. So Blanca Rodriguez has written a paper on this in Oxford, where she clearly showed that based on for patients with cardiomyopathy, that they first did a clustering based on the signals that they measured from the patients, the heart monitoring signals, and then they were able to explain with an ion channel model what is exactly different in these patient groups that they clustered in.
So there were a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, from Jacob on the white box versus the black box, I just want to say that what my presentation was a bunch of things together that talks about how to talk to people that have very limited technical background, and then sometimes I know black box versus white box is not something that is used anymore in that sense, but it helps them to explain that not per se black versus white, but that there's a spectrum, and that there's a spectrum on which you have pure data, no mechanisms on one end, and pure mechanisms and no data, well, no raw data that you're just putting in on the other hand, and then things in between, not per se for the white and the black box models.
Lorenzo, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I was thinking what I put in the chat that at the end of the day, for whatever we do, we need to build confidence in the value of each model. So I think strategically, the better thing will be creating discrete model that can do one thing well or set a prediction well, then we can update them and we can get to very high confidence and then combine them. But then we can build confidence in the individual piece. And it's easier from the maintenance point of view, from the finding data sets or creating data sets. And then well, if something gets better, we can always update. So I think modularity and separation of concerns will be the way to go rather than big models that can do everything. But this, of course, depends which application we are thinking about.
I think that nicely aligns with what Jacob is writing, and then it depends on what you are using to tie these discrete parts together. It can be a more mechanistic, classical multi-skill model, if you will, or it can be an agentic AI, where in the agents you have the discrete models that are there. I don't know from the top of my head, Jacob, anybody working on, well, I know of projects, but I don't know good examples that are already doing that, where there is actually a mechanistic model in the agentic. Yeah, I've heard of projects, but from the top of my head, I cannot mention them. We actually will be starting one in the next couple of months, where the aim is to build an AI infrastructure. Europe loves to fund infrastructure projects. It's ridiculous. That will combine the living situation of the patient, so that there will be a part on the smart house, and then there is the smart patient or the smart GP, and it will connect both sensing aspects, but then also mechanistic models, and then more data-driven aspects, looking at clinical guidelines and really trying to pick up things from the patients. It's very vague, I'm sorry. There will be that's something that we will start working on, but there are more of those. I can look them up. Don't know them from the top of my head.
Joel, do you have another question?
Yeah, I actually I was writing a paper about, or I wrote a paper about that, and I remembered that the VPH had some domain-specific initiatives to, like, in-silico models to be close to like VAV40s for physical biomedical systems, right? And the good practice book
Yeah.
also. Is there an idea for how to make that applicable to all models that we do, mechanistic models?
Yes, so the VMV40 is not a VPH thing. That's actually an ASME standard that we're now trying to harmonize. And that was for physics-based models in the development of medical devices, not even for software as a medical device, which would then be more extensive, because it could also be a model about then any mechanistic. But the good thing about the standard, the way it was developed, was that it is very generic. It describes a risk-based approach that actually also, if you look at the guidances related to credibility for AI in medical devices and in drugs, they follow the same steps: verification, validation, uncertainty, quantification. What are the measures of acceptance? What are the series of experiments that you're going to do? What would you consider to be successful, and then run it and show that it actually works, and have the same critical approach to the quality of the data that you're actually using. So all of these principles, they come back and they can be used everywhere. The good simulation practice was something that started as a white paper, where we thought let's build something, or let's propose maybe to other organizations like OECD or ICH to create an actual GSP. And then it became just too large to print as a white paper, so that it became a book. What it does is it just explains the main concepts of the VMV40, but then tries to already open it up to all kinds of models. So there is a different culture within the medicines versus the medical devices. It's engineers versus pharmacy people in terms of looking at credibility. So in the book, we try to keep it a bit open. There is suddenly that distinction between technical validation and clinical validation, which is less used in medical devices, but is absolutely crucial for pharma. So yeah, again, long story short, the same concepts apply to all sorts of models, even the AI models.
So the hopes is to have something that follows every model. Like a part of the documentation of a model is having that,
Yes,
something that looks like that.
like
that part of
verification, validation, and certain quantification. And we've seen in the VPH conferences that are mostly attended by Europeans, but also there's some people from New Zealand and the US every year that are attending as well. That from the beginning, from I think 10 years ago, we started doing a training on the ASME VMV40. So colleagues from ASME came to the conference to give a training. And what we saw last year, actually 2 years ago, that there were less people in the training, but that the concepts were in the abstracts everywhere. That people were saying, this is my model, and then for the verification validation. And so people started using that vocabulary. And I think that it really shows maturity of the field, and that's also really important when talking to people that are writing the new regulations. The medical device regulation in Europe was recently or is being revised. So a proposal was submitted, and actually those people that were writing the text, they quite literally said in October, until 2 months ago, I did not think that we needed to include in-silico models in the medical device regulation because they would not be there. But then we had been pushing for 2 years from all different sides, and it all came together like in a perfect storm. And now in-silico is everywhere in the medical device regulation as well, because we have this vocabulary, we had the maturity of the field that we could show. So I think it's very worthwhile to focus on these aspects, and also for our students and for our own work, that we get beyond the academics and into the translation.
Yeah, my question was more on the definition of the digital twin models. Because if you are trying to understand the human mechanism physiology, it's more stochastic. Should there be more of white models which are knowledge based rather than the black or gray, which are like partially driven by AI or partially by hybrid models, kind of a thing? And how do you specifically design whether this digital model is good enough for use?
You can explicitly incorporate the stochasticity if you do white box, but you can also do population modeling with black box, or with I think across the spectrum you can capture this kind of population behavior. It just depends on the way or the technology that you use, but I'm not sure that there is an inherent superiority between white or black box. But
Well, I was just thinking, like, so part of the virtual human development, we're considering early embryo stages, and there you're limited with ethical boundaries. There's less data. There's a lot of things. So I think you can push as much as you can with data analysis, but at some point you have to switch to some mechanism or something that would get you into the area where it is a black box, and you're trying to use white box to go into it. If that, but I think you already said it. I think we have to realize where it is useful to use our data, where it is useful to use a model. How do we know if it's good or not? I think James has mentioned it many times, and we've had, I think James Sharp also came, eventually models have to be tested by perturbations or some other models that can show us that we're not just repeating what you see, but we can actually push the boundaries. And I mean, we haven't got to the questions of trust or anything like that, but I think like our models couldn't just be good enough. And good enough is not just, hey, I can explain your data or I can repeat your data. I mean, who cares? But if I can actually, show you something, and if you actually changed and perturbed, I can also recreate that, or I can explain why that happened, or some capturing, then I think that's where the models become valuable and actually trustworthy or reliable. I think we have to start emphasizing that a model is not just just answering one thing, but it should be explaining more. It should be providing insight and pushing that boundary where we can test it and validate it in different ways. And I think perturbations right now is one of the first methods. I don't know if it answered your question, Adita. As she said, it is actually a hard question that you just posed.
It was just
But
a thought which I got in because currently we are discussing more on the policy level and the final stages of model. That like long way to go, but how we are developing models, a lot of models are already available. So how should we define and make a model in that way so that it is applicable? Thinking in the long term range. In that sense, I was asking the question.
Maybe from the policy side, what I noticed, it also depends on who the policy, what is the background of the policymakers when you're having this conversation. Like the Director General that was responsible for writing the medical device regulation are mostly medical doctors, legal people, and well, they have very little to no knowledge about modeling. So when they see an in-silico model, they immediately think, oh, it's not possible to have a model of a whole cell and do everything that a cell does. And then you're like, yeah, but nobody said that, right? Nobody claims that we're making a model that can reproduce an entire human in its completeness. I mean, there is a context of use, there is a question of interest. And in that specific zone, we're going to answer this question. And that this is how we're going to show that you can have credibility. So there is also that mistaken expectation from people when they hear a model that if you have a model of a train that has all of the details that are in an actual train, then it's no longer a model, then it's a train. And a mouse model is also a model, and of course a mouse is not a human, and you know that. So why do you think that we would claim something like this? So but we need to say that over and over and over and over again, even though for us it's absolutely logical, but the people that don't have that background don't understand this. So it's maybe not so much what technology exactly, but how do we show credibility for any model that you use? And some models you want to use not to answer a question why, you just want to, you've shown that it is able to do that, and then it just makes it's used in another way than really making that mechanistic insight possible.
I guess it's the difference between fidelity and utility, right? Like one thing, whenever you're using those terms, that what comes to mind. Like it's okay to have something that is very comparable to the real data, but sometimes to answer some questions, you just need to be, as you said, good enough, right, Maria? I think Maria was the one that said that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm a little concerned that we're talking about a lot of different kinds of application and a lot of different concepts of what we mean by reliability and trustworthiness. At one point, I think you made the comment, which was in a sense saying that you use data-based methods primarily, and then you use mechanistic modeling to provide base level scientific understanding of how things work. If we had Gary Ann here, he would remind us that in general, at least classically, and the world is changing rapidly, machine learning methods were less good at extrapolation outside of the training set, so they didn't handle contrafactuals and rare cases as well as mechanistic models could.
Mm-hmm.
You do have always the limitation that you're limited by the training data that you have when you're using pure database methods. And sometimes you're lucky and that training data contains enough information about what would have happened outside of the training regime to be able to do extrapolation, sometimes not. And so I think coming back to something you said at the very beginning, which is you really do have to think about the purpose of what you're trying to do with a model before you can define what reliability or trustworthiness for that model mean. And once you've done that, then perhaps the question about how do you optimally employ database methods versus mechanistic methods might be more easy to answer in particular contexts.
I think that that is maybe the thing that we underestimate when we talk to different people, and maybe when you talk more to people that are not technical developers or the clinicians, then you realize that everybody understands things very differently. So you need to start with what is really the basis and explain very well, because otherwise people will fill in the blanks, and usually they will do so from their own perspective and their own understanding or misunderstanding of concepts. So that is something that we need to learn to not do. And maybe to come back to Jacob's remark, what they think we can and cannot do is, well, there are examples already of a lot of models that have made it into clinical practice, that have had, that already are being reimbursed in clinical decision support, but also in talking to the patients, digital medical devices. There are specific fast track applications or reimbursement tracks in Europe for that. So there are examples already across the board where this can be done. It's just that the examples are mostly focusing on a single length scale and a single organ system to keep it very much contained and simple. So they know that things can be done, but I think the issue is that they don't really see what realistically can be done, but that they are afraid is maybe a big word, but that they think that technology developers will come and say, we can do everything next year already, and you don't have to do any more clinical trials, you don't have to do any more animal experiments. And so that is why they are pushing back, because they're starting from this narrative. And that is again why showing more tangible examples, also showing that this is still smaller scale, that is important. I agree, you must do clinical trials, yes. There's also a discussion on whether in-silico can ever be clinical data, or whether it can be. So now the compromise is that it's part of the clinical package, as in it can help to better design clinical trials, but that the actual clinical data can only come from humans.
But perhaps we can use evolvable models, in-silico models, to guide the best clinical trials, as we have done with statistic, which is also modeled. So it's
Exactly.
they're repeating the same exercise with a newer thing and a more capable thing.
Old wine in new bags, or with a little bit of an upgrade. Yes, no, that's absolutely, that's how they're also getting approval now, more and more, not to do augmentation of clinical studies at this point in Europe for medical devices is not possible, or just anywhere. Augmentation is not possible, not even for breakthrough devices or for orphan cases, because the legislation doesn't allow that. But this is one of the things that we wanted to change. And so there is this whole fuzzy thing now that in-silico can be part of the clinical package, but not really clinical data. So they made it a bit more fuzzy to not really open the door fully to do augment or to do replacement, but yeah, to not prohibit newer uses.
I think this is actually the main point of our discussion. I think I would hope for a future, sort of like when you have an experiment, you know exactly what tools you're going to use, you know which PCR or whatever types of gels and analysis you need. I hope at some point, when you get to a certain point in an experiment, the next thought is, hey, we need to build a model and test these experiments or see if we can build them. And I think models should be part of the scientific method as opposed to like an afterthought. And I'm hoping that this discussion is one of the first to sort of bring them forefront, right? I hope everybody can see that it's very difficult. We're not really sure exactly how to explain, but we want to show that they're useful. And the other thing I think we sort of touched upon a little bit is the expertise. I think you called technical application or people who make applications, but we're more than that, right? We're theoreticians. We've been trained for many years. We have a different, just like experimentalists have that intuition of knowing exactly which experiment to use and how to, when you've been building models for like 20, 30 years, we're beyond just, application makers. We have some background and quite skills. And I think this is where you have to bring the expertise in. And it's not just looping in the clinical expertise, but the theoretical expertise. And AI is just another tool, and we should never just assume that it's right without the true expertise behind it. And I think there should be expertise from all sides. Like if it's a clinical data, we should ensure that the clinicians and people who've had training in this for many years to know how to interpret it. And the same thing with experts. Theoretical experts. We know how to interpret the models. We have a better understanding of limitations. And the more we share it with each other, and that's the whole point of knowing where our models, which questions we can answer, and all those things become important in the expertise of it. And I feel like we have to come back to not just AI, but the human intelligence that needs to be maintained in all these loops. And I think that might also help answer some of Jacob's questions, that we're not ignoring these. These are, I think, are essential. But it was just, I hope everybody appreciated this is an important start to the discussion, and we need to, maybe hone in and figure out, but I hope at one point models or in-silico or any become a natural part of the scientific methods, right? And that's where we're hoping this future is. Please feel free to send us more questions.
And maybe you want to make a trip overseas if your funding allows that. You're very welcome at the VPH conference, which is the first week of September in Milan. We will also have a standardization seminar. We will have a workshop for the VHT, the virtual human twin infrastructure that is being built, and then lots of discussions also on ethics and on credibility. So might be a good place to come and check out.
Okay, I want to thank everybody then for coming today.